My name is Lisa Chen, and I'm a former lieutenant in the Global Peace Alliance. This is my story, the story of how the world ended, not with a bang, but with a carefully orchestrated whimper. I remember the day I signed up to join the Army. It was August 18th, 2042. There was a mega hurricane destroying the Caribbean, and there were forest fires raging across most of southern Europe. I went down to the recruitment center and stood in line, watching the ash and soot from the Oregon fires drift past the windows like snowflakes. Name? The recruiter asked, her attention focused on the hollow screen as she tapped away. Lisa Chen, I responded. Reason for enlistment. I took a deep breath. The real reason was because I wanted to do my part. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to stop the world from going to hell in a handbasket. Because I want to help, I said. The woman paused, as if not expecting that answer. Good, she said. That's what we need. Welcome aboard. 3 weeks later, I was standing at the entrance to Fort Horizon, a sprawling training facility in the former state of Washington. The sun was shining brightly on the solar panels that covered the buildings, and a steady stream of vehicles was coming and going from the gates. All right, let's go. Processing is this way, Sergeant Foster said, his heavily scared face shouting at all us new recruits as he led us toward the main building. We don't have all day. We were led through hallways that were lined with monitors, all displaying the world's most crucial problems. First time seeing the big picture. A voice beside me asked. I turned to find a young man with kind eyes and a nervous smile. I'm Tom from Milwaukee. Lisa, I replied, grateful for the human connection in the sterile, high-tech environment. And yeah, it's a lot. That's why we're here, isn't it? He said. To make those red dots go away. We didn't have time to talk further. A few moments later, we entered the processing center, where they scanned us and gave us clothes and equipment. They put us through a series of tests, both physical and mental, and after a few hours, we were ready to begin training. Lieutenant Chen, Commander Handler, called to me sometime around the 3rd week of tactical training. I looked up from the holographic battlefield I was working on, my squad mates having already exited the room. Please wait a moment. He approached, his gait deliberate and his posture impeccable. It made me sit up straighter. You've done a good job so far, he said, not quite smiling, especially with the Mumbai flood incident yesterday. I like how you decided to incorporate the displaced people into the rebuilding effort, rather than just treating them as casualties. Thank you, sir. I thought. We're promoting you. He cut me off, handing me a tablet. We want you thinking on a higher level from now on, starting today. But I haven't even finished basic training yet, sir. I know, Lieutenant, but the times are changing. The old ways and institutions won't be able to keep up. He turned back to the door. And Chen, check the new satellite footage of the Arctic. Something's happening up there. That night, I lay awake in my new quarters, staring out the window at the military base below. I could see the tall walls of Fort Horizon in the distance, and the defenses built into the structure, designed to keep out any potential threats. My tablet beeped, indicating a new message. It was a new assignment set to begin the following day. As I read through the details, I began to realize that something was happening up in the Arctic, something that could explain why my training had focused so much on natural disasters. But I had a feeling we were training to fight the wrong enemy. We should have been preparing to fight something else, something much more dangerous. I looked at my reflection in the window. My short black hair and dark eyes stared back at me. I had come a long way in the past 3 months, I'd gone from being a civilian to being a soldier, and now I was about to face the unknown. My tablet beeped again. It was a message from Sergeant Foster. Get some sleep, Lieutenant. Tomorrow is going to be interesting. I smiled to myself. Interesting was an understatement. But I was ready for it. I was ready for whatever came next. And whatever it was, I was going to face it head on. The ash continued to fall outside my window. It was like a never-ending snowstorm, but instead of snow, it was black and gray flakes of burnt debris. It was a constant reminder of the destruction that had been wrought upon the world, and it was a constant reminder of the task that lay ahead of me. I closed my eyes and tried to get some sleep, but it was difficult. My mind was racing with thoughts of what was to come. Eventually, I drifted off into a fitful sleep, filled with dreams of fire and destruction. When I woke up the next morning, I felt groggy and disoriented. The alarm on my tablet was beeping, reminding me that it was time to get up and get ready for the day. I took a quick shower, got dressed in my uniform, and made my way to the briefing room. As I walked through the corridors of Fort Horizon, I noticed that the ash had stopped falling. It was still covering everything outside, but it had stopped coming down from the sky. The next day, the dust had cleared from the windows of Fort Horizon. I was standing in briefing room Delta, wearing my brand new uniform. Dismissed, Handler said, tapping the table's interface. Central Africa now. The map showed several areas of flooding, with red zones highlighted where the water had broken through the barriers, and yellow indicators where insurgents were taking advantage of the situation. 3 days ago, the flood control grid in the Zambezi River Basin went down, Foster said. The local army is overwhelmed, and an insurgency is looting the emergency supplies. I glanced at the map and saw something the others hadn't noticed. Sir, these 2 refugee movements here and here, I gestured at the 2 data points moving towards one another. They're being funneled. He smiled. What do you mean? I pointed out all the spots where I'd seen this happen. The insurgents are using the floods as an opportunity to herd everyone into ambushes where they can kill them and take their supplies. Evaluation? Handler asked, somewhat defiantly. I nodded, getting an idea. Well, let them come in, use the same technique against them. This terrain is perfect for creating bottlenecks and choke points. We can set up relief centers here, here, and here, make them either abort the plan or take off the mask. Foster added, nodding with approval. Exactly. I turned to Handler. We can save the townspeople and handle the threat at the same time. Good work, Lieutenant. Handler said, eyes twinkling. Do it. The following 12 hours were spent preparing for the journey. Dozens of transport vessels were fueled up and ready to go. Across the landing platforms of Fort Horizon, Alpha through Delta are in position. Foster said over the comms, awaiting your go, ahead, Lieutenant. I watched the live feed, waiting for the right moment. The insurgents were going where I expected them to go. Initiate Phase 1, I said. Refugee centers began to send out signals, drawing civilians toward them. We lay in wait. Incoming from the south, looks like a full house, a tactical officer said. They took the bait. On my signal. I replied, preparing for the ambush. On my signal. We didn't want to start a war and get civilians killed. No. We came at them from all sides at once. They didn't have anywhere to run. This is the Global Peace Alliance. Foster announced over the battlefield. Drop your weapons or we'll be forced to engage. It was quick. Most of them gave up. A few of them fought, but we were ready for that. L, regions clear. Foster said. Civilian casualties, none. We did it, Lieutenant. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but there was still more work to be done to ensure the safety of the civilians and the distribution of supplies. Later that day, I made my way to Handler's office back at Horizon to give him my report. "Nicely done, Lieutenant," Handler said, looking over the mission report. "Innovative approach, low collateral damage, high yield. The higher-ups are happy." "Thank you, sir." I paused. "Sir, regarding the Arctic," Handler smiled. "One problem at a time, Lieutenant. But yes, that situation is developing. Get some sleep. You deserve it." I left his office, thinking about how much had changed, and how much more was yet to come. I saw my reflection in the glass. I looked the same, but I felt different. Sergeant Foster was waiting for me in the hallway. "Hell of a first command, Chen," he said, joining me. "But I have a feeling this was the easy part." "The Arctic?" I asked. He nodded. "The Handler has that look on his face, like he knows something we don't, but whatever it is." He didn't finish his sentence. I thought of the melt, and I felt a shiver run through my spine. "I think we can figure it out," I said. Foster laughed. "That's the spirit, Lieutenant. That's the spirit." As we walked through the corridors of Fort Horizon, I saw that the emergency alerts continued to flash on the walls. Besides the floods and the ongoing conflicts, I noticed more and more alerts coming in from the Arctic region, marked as classified. I knew one thing for sure. I was ready for the next step, whatever it was. But as I looked at the alert feeds, I couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of something much darker, something lurking beneath the melting ice. The rest of the night was a blur of classified reports and urgent alerts. I managed to get a few hours of sleep in my quarters, but my mind was racing with thoughts, trying to make sense of everything that was happening. The Arctic documents kept coming to mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the blacked-out sections were hiding something even more sinister than I had imagined. I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, when the emergency alert came. I laid awake in bed that night, thinking about the trip to the Arctic. At around 3:00 a.m., I received a notification on my tablet. It wasn't the usual environmental warning messages. "L staff to Central Command viewing stations immediately." After a few minutes, I saw soldiers leaving their rooms. I made my way to the main viewing hall where hundreds of people were watching the giant monitors. They were showing a live feed from Paris. "Is that the G7 summit?" I heard someone ask behind me. It was, but something was wrong with them. They all looked like they were in a trance. President Chen came up to the microphone first. "Due to the unprecedented worldwide circumstances," he said, "we have decided to cede control of our countries to the Global Peace Alliance." The others started to whisper to each other. Sergeant Foster came up to me. "This is wrong," he said, his disfigured face reflecting off the monitors. One after another, they all said the same thing. They all gave the same prepared speech, offering up their countries to the United Nations, just like the President of the United States had done. "Lieutenant Chen." Commander Handler called from the entrance. He was smiling again. "In my office now." The trip to his office seemed to take forever. Everywhere we went, I saw the same images on the screens, the same impossible video playing over and over again. Handler was sitting behind his desk when I entered his office. He looked much more relaxed than I felt. "What do you think, Lieutenant?" "Permission to speak freely, sir." "Always." "This doesn't make any sense," I said, trying to put it delicately. "These world leaders, they were missing for 3 days last week during that Arctic emergency. Now, all of a sudden, they come back and they're abolishing their governments." He smiled a bit wider now. "Yes, what else?" Something's wrong with them. And sir, I mean no disrespect, but what is the truth? Why does it keep coming up in restricted files? The room felt colder all of a sudden. That's above your pay grade, Lieutenant. Just do your job. Things are different now. We need to adapt. But sir, you're dismissed, Lieutenant. The mess hall was buzzing with activity later that morning. People were talking in hushed whispers, and I grabbed a coffee and sat down with Foster and some of the other officers. They're saying the generals were swapped out, a lieutenant muttered. Some kind of copies, clones, Foster said, chuckling. Try mind control. I was up in the Arctic last month. You wouldn't believe what we saw up there. What did you see? I asked. Sitting up, he looked around and said, No, but it has something to do with the melters. The what? Shh. Foster said, That's just what we're calling them. People who, evaporate. First, it was just the people living near the ice sheets. I remembered some of the redacted sections in my briefing about the station's history and was about to ask more questions when an announcement came over the mess hall's screens. The Global Peace Alliance will now take command of all armed forces on the planet, a representative of the GPA said. All chain of commands will be restructured under a single command. And there's the catch, Foster said. Of course. Some of them seemed to understand, but for others, it was like a light bulb had gone off in their heads, and they were beginning to see behind the curtain for the first time. A private from my tactical team sat down across from me. He handed me a tablet. Check this out, he said. I found it in the security footage from the G7 summit. The video showed a woman walking down a hallway. I recognized her as the German chancellor. A couple of seconds later, her body began to flicker like a bad TV signal, and then her entire being faded away. Jesus, I said. It gets worse, Torres said. Look what time she came back. The image skipped ahead and there she was, coming out from the same corridor. But the timestamp, it was from before she had gone into the corridor. The screen went black. Commander Handler had arrived at our table and turned the tablet off. Giving away classified information, Private Torres, he asked. Detention Block C. Sir, I was only. Go. The man left the room, escorted by 2 security officers who had just entered. I looked at Handler and saw something in his eyes for the first time. Don't forget what you're here for, Lieutenant, he said. The world needs order. We bring that order. Nothing else matters. As he left, Foster turned to me. Be careful, Chen. Things are going to get interesting. I looked at my cup of coffee. I had lost my appetite. The world had changed, and I was beginning to think Fort Horizon was at the center of it all, and maybe not in a good way. The screens on the walls were still broadcasting the new world order, and the soldiers around us were still talking about the melting people and the secrets of the Arctic. I thought about the ash that had been falling from the sky the day I enlisted, and how it had seemed like a bad omen to me at the time. Perhaps I should have listened to my gut. And yet, what other choice did I have? 3 days later, I was called to Handler's office. I hadn't been able to sleep since my encounter with Foster, and I had spent the time restlessly pacing my room, listening to the news broadcasts and watching the ash. The ash had stopped falling 3 days later, but there was something else in the air now. I was in Handler's office, watching him brief me on my mission while smiling broadly. North Korea is a special place, Lieutenant Chen, he said, swiping his fingers through the holographic interface. There are some special things within the research labs of the previous regime. What kinds of things, sir? I asked. trying to act normal despite how uncomfortable I felt watching him swipe his fingers. That's classified. Your mission is to extract the contents of Site 7. The map revealed a mountain complex buried beneath the eternal snow, with red warning symbols flashing around it. You'll be working with our blackout units, Handler said. Extraction will be handled by the Golden Birds. I had heard of the silent, golden helicopters that could appear and disappear in an instant, but no one really knew what they were. Sir, the mess hall yesterday. Mission first, Lieutenant, he said, smile gone. Carry on. As I exited Foster's office, the sergeant was standing there, his disfigured face looking as serious as ever. You get the assignment, he said, walking alongside me. Some of it. You're coming with me. Someone's got to keep you safe, Chen. There's something off about Handler, his mannerisms, speech. It's like he's not really himself. I interrupted. Foster nodded. Just like the G7 leaders. 12 hours later, we found ourselves on a stealth transport heading into North Korea. 5 minutes to drop, the pilot said. I glanced around at our team of 8, including 2 members of the blackout units. They were sitting away from the rest of us, wearing tactical masks which concealed their faces, and they hadn't said a word since they arrived. All right, listen up, everyone. Our objective is recon and retrieval. Do not engage unless necessary. What exactly are we retrieving, LT? Private Rodriguez asked. One of them interrupted me, saying, concentrate on your duties. The air inside the helicopter became even colder. We landed, and after disembarking, we watched the helicopter fly away. 2 clicks north, movement, Foster said over the comm. We moved forward in formation, heading towards the research facility. Contact, Rodriguez said. 3 targets, northeast corner. Wait, I replied, staring at the thermal display. There were no heat signatures. One of them suddenly stepped forward. Let him go, I said. Let him go. They didn't listen to me and continued to head towards the facility. Gunfire rang out from multiple directions, and I realized it was an ambush. Contact, Foster called out. Multiple hostiles surrounding us. Everything happened so fast. Suddenly, there were tracer rounds flying through the air and bullets hitting the snow around us. I threw myself to the ground and fired back. Rodriguez, how we doing? I asked over the radio. Nothing. Rodriguez, do you copy? He's gone, Lieutenant? Foster said, his voice strained. Just gone? Like the rest. I heard one of the men screaming. It was Private Chen, no relation, and saw him stumbling backwards, dropping his weapon. Oh God, he said softly. The faces are. He was about to say something else, but then he just disappeared. Retreat, I shouted. Rally point, Charlie. Fall back. There was no sign of the blackout operators. As we retreated, I saw people running in the woods, but they weren't quite right, and then I heard the sound of helicopters. 3 of them were coming from the east, the golden color of their hulls glistening in the morning sun. Extraction team, Foster said without confidence. I saw helicopters land in a clearing up ahead, and children emerged from them, barefoot and half naked, their eyes glowing golden. Lieutenant Lisa Chen, one of them said, sounding like a dozen voices at once. Commander Handler sends his regards. Move back, I shouted. Move back. We backed away into the forest as another round of gunshots went off. When we reached the backup rendezvous point, half of our squad was missing. Not dead, just gone. We were airlifted back to Fort Horizon. The 4 of us who survived sat in silence the whole way back. There wasn't much to say. Handler was waiting for us when we got back. Congratulations, Lieutenant, he said, handing me a tablet. You've been promoted. I looked at the screens of my tablet. I had been promoted. but the cost of that promotion had been the lives of every other soldier in my unit. "Sir," I began, "what was that outside? Those kids." "Air confidential," he interrupted, "as is the rest of what you witnessed this evening. You got that?" I nodded, feeling Foster's eyes on the back of my head. "Okay," Handler said. "Go to sleep now, Lieutenant. You deserve it." As I turned to leave, I overheard him speaking to someone under his breath. The Golden Children performed just as expected. Initiate Phase 2. Back in my quarters, I stared out the window at the sunrise over Fort Horizon's walls. The new rank insignia felt like a badge of shame. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the wrong side of something much larger than we understood. My tablet chimed with a message from Foster. "Meeting 200. North Maintenance, Level C. Come alone." I deleted it immediately. Whatever was happening, whatever Handler and his golden-eyed children were planning, I knew one thing for sure: we weren't fighting to save the world anymore. We were fighting to save humanity. And I wasn't sure which side Fort Horizon was really on. The next couple of days, I didn't sleep much. Foster's meeting had confirmed my suspicions. The Golden Children weren't human, not anymore. I spent every waking moment digging through classified files, trying to piece together the truth. But eventually, my exhaustion caught up with me, and I drifted off into a restless sleep. I was in my room, watching the sunrise for the third day in a row. I hadn't been able to sleep since the mission in North Korea. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Private Chen dissolve into nothingness, and I could still hear his scream in my ears. My tablet beeped with a priority message. It was Commander Handler. "Briefing room Alpha, 10 minutes, he said. "Bring Sergeant Foster." The call ended. I went to the door and found Foster already standing there. "Man, you look like Erkaus Chen," he said, walking alongside me. "Thanks. You don't look so good either." As we made our way to the briefing room, I noticed that the hallways were mostly deserted. Those who we did pass by looked away quickly and hurried off. "Did you see what I saw?" Foster's asked as we neared the briefing room. "You mean other than the entire station looking like a wake?" "The security cameras. They've been pointing in different directions. It happened overnight." I looked up and saw he was right. The cameras were all pointed a little bit off to the side. Handler was standing at the front of the room, beside a couple of officers who I didn't recognize. "Lieutenant Chen, Sergeant Foster, have a seat." A hologram lit up in front of us, indicating areas of concern. There were red marks all over the globe, but they weren't natural disasters. "In the last 3 days," Handler said, "we've identified 317 different melt incidents." The screen cut to security camera footage from a subway station in London. A man stopped in his tracks, turned, attacked a stranger, and then vanished, leaving only his clothing and briefcase behind. "Christ," Foster whispered. As I said, Handler continued, "They become violent, and then they disintegrate. Nothing left, no body, no residual molecules." Sir," I said, "is this a weapon?" "That would be good," Handler replied, "because we know how to handle biological weapons." The officer in charge took a step forward and said with an odd voice, "This is something else." Foster moved his hand closer to his gun. I felt the same urge. "We've had intel," Handler said, "that there's a document, one that explains all of this, how to end it." The image changed to a facility located deep inside the Ural Mountains. "The document is in the possession of a person named God," Handler went on. "And your job is to get it back." "God?" I asked incredulously. "It's a code name, of course," Handler answered, but his look said otherwise. "You depart in 6 hours. The details will be sent to your tablets." "You, sir," Foster started. About the North Korea mission, the Golden Children. That's confidential, Sergeant. Handler's words were sharp. You're dismissed. Once we were in the hallway, Foster pulled me into a janitorial alcove. Chen, it's not right, everything is wrong. Those cops in there, their shadows were wrong. I had noticed the same thing. The Melters, the golden-eyed kids, now this god person. I shook my head. What is really going on here? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure Handler's in on it. I think it's affecting him. Haven't you noticed the way he walks? It's like he's some sort of robot, Chen. Then I got the notification about our mission. I read through it, and my stomach dropped. Foster, check this out. The rescue team Golden Children, he said, catching up on the text. Like North Korea, we can't go with them. Rodriguez, Chen, you saw what happened to them. What do we do? LT. We could go in, but proceed with caution. I had a feeling this god person might have some information for us that Handler didn't want us to hear, You're talking about mission deviation. I'm talking about survival. I looked at my watch. 20 hours, Armory. Only bring people you can trust with your life. Foster nodded. Not many. I returned to my quarters and began to prepare. There was something very wrong happening here. People were going missing, and it looked like our commanding officers were in on it, whatever it was. My tablet dinged, and I picked it up to see I had received another email from the anonymous person with the letter G. The truth is in the ice. Trust no one who doesn't cast the proper shadow. A G. I deleted the email and looked out the window, seeing the sun had risen. Long shadows were being cast on the ground. I saw people on the base walking around, and a shiver went up my spine. The truth is in the ice, I said, recalling the Arctic briefings that had kicked all of this off. Wherever we were headed in the Urals, it seemed to be the beginning of something far more sinister than any of us had bargained for. A few hours later, after some intense, secretive planning and a few white lies to some higher-ups, we were on a transport headed for the Urals. We were flying toward our destination now, and I couldn't see anything out the windows. It was pitch black outside, and we'd been in the air for hours, maybe 6 or 7. It was hard to tell. We'd crossed several borders, but those didn't matter anymore. The GPA was in charge now. Foster was sitting across from me, checking his gun and his equipment. There were 4 other soldiers with us, all of whom we'd selected because they were trustworthy and because they cast shadows. 2 minutes to drop. The pilot said over the comms. All right, I said, looking at my squad mates, we need to get in and get out. If the Golden Children show up, retreat to our secondary positions. No unnecessary risks. And what about the document? Martinez asked, shaking her rifle out. Only if it's safe to do so. I have a feeling God won't let us leave without a fight. The transport landed in a clearing full of dead trees. We stepped out into the freezing cold. Contact, right side. Yu's voice crackled in my ear. 400 meters. I looked toward the forest in the distance through my binoculars. No one there. The abandoned military base was right in front of us. Clues formation, I said. Foster, on point. We walked through the ruins in silence. No wind, no birds. No sound at all except for the crunch of our footsteps in the snow. Contact, Paddle said, barely audible. Northwest corner, 2nd floor. Through my scope, I saw movement, a small child naked. Golden child, Foster was saying. Just one. Never just one, I was saying. Retreat to. There was a sound of children laughing from all around us. Circle up, I yelled. Backs together. A moment later, a bunch of half-naked children with golden eyes came crawling up the hill, looking at us as if we were prey. Don't shoot, I commanded, ignoring my gut. Just hold. One of them, a girl who looked to be no more than 12 years old, stepped forward with a grin too wide for her face. "Lieutenant Lisa Chen," she said, her voice a chorus of awful whispers. "God is waiting. We're taking the file," I said, aiming my rifle at her center mass. "Yes, the truth," she said, her head tilting at an unnatural angle. "Are you sure you want it?" Suddenly, fog began to pour in from all directions, and the golden children became indistinct, multiplying as the mist grew thicker. Contact left. Jackson yelled, and then shots rang out. Everything became confused. I heard gunshots and saw shapes moving in the fog, some small and others large. "He's down," Martinez shouted. "We was down. He's gone." "Regroup," I commanded. "Rally point Alpha." Someone grabbed me from behind, spinning me around and making me pull the trigger of the shotgun. A quick look showed it had been the golden child. "Foster," I shouted. "Report." He didn't answer. I heard another scream and looked over to see Jackson being eaten alive by the creatures. His gun fell to the ground as he disappeared. "Lieutenant," it was Paddle calling out from somewhere to my right, "they're trying to funnel us." She was right. They were trying to drive us toward the main building, using the fog and chaos to split us up. "Martinez, Patel, get back to the transport," I said. "Foster, if you can hear me." Suddenly, something hit me from the side, and I fell to the ground. I got up and pulled the trigger, but there was nothing there. The laughter and giggling was all around me now. The fog was getting thicker. A boy with golden eyes appeared right in front of me, smiling. "The truth hurts," he said. "I was hit in the back of the head by something and fell into the snow. As I was blacking out, I saw Foster's face appearing on the other side of the mist, trying to tell me something. Then everything went dark. When I woke up, I found myself back in the infirmary at Fort Horizon." "Lieutenant," I heard Handler's voice. "You've been out for 3 days." I couldn't turn my head, it hurt too much. "Don't try to get up," he said. "The golden children sometimes play a little rough." "Foster," I gasped. "The others?" "Sergeant Foster is in the other room. Martinez and Patel were successfully extracted. The rest?" He smiled, thin-lipped. "Casualties are a necessary part of the truth." But just before I faded out completely, I glimpsed Handler's shadow on the wall, and for a moment, it looked all wrong. There was a child standing behind him, and it was grinning up at me with a smile that went from ear to ear. I never did find out what the truth was, but it felt like I was close, too close, and I would find out eventually, wouldn't I? Yeah. It was impossible to know how much time passed as I lay there in darkness, in unconsciousness, in sleep. My dreams were fevered and filled with golden eyes watching me from the shadows, and the shadow of Handler, and the sounds of children and laughing. But I couldn't wake up, despite my best efforts. I heard voices around me occasionally. I felt hands on me, but every time I tried to open my eyes, I just passed out again, falling back into the blackness. Finally, though, I came to my senses. I awoke a second time. It was day now, but still the same room. "Good morning, Lieutenant Chen." A woman in a white coat stood at the foot of my bed. She held a tablet. "I'm Dr. Wells. How are you feeling today?" Like I got shot in the head," I replied. "That's normal after getting shot in the head," she smiled. "Do you remember what happened?" I tried to remember the images that had flashed through my mind, but they were gone. "Our assignment," I explained. "The Urals. We were sent to find." "That's quite all right," Dr. Wells interjected. "Gaps in memory are typical post-treatment." I tried to get up but noticed I was tied to the bed. The doctor saw this. "Standard protocol," she said. "Sometimes the patients get restless during integration." Integration. Treatment. She smiled, almost convincingly. A nurse will be by soon with your medication. When she turned to leave, I saw her shadow on the wall, and it looked completely normal, as if she were a person. Something about that struck me as significant, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The nurse who came in wasn't my relative either, despite having my last name. She was very efficient and injected something into my IV. "What is that?" I asked. "A little something to help with the transition. With the healing," she said, catching herself. I could see people being wheeled past my door, their faces blank and their eyes staring off into space. "Lieutenant," the voice asked. It was Private Martinez. She was standing at the door. "They said I could come see you for a few minutes." "Martinez," I replied. "What happened? Where's Foster?" She looked over her shoulder at the security camera. "You are recovering nicely," she said, then leaned in, whispering, "This isn't the same base. This isn't the same people." Before I had a chance to answer, a therapist showed up. At least, I assumed he was a therapist. "Visiting hours are over," he said. "Lieutenant Chen is going to be needing her rest." She nodded, turning to go, but before she did, I caught her saying quietly, "Watch the shadows." For the next few days, I was subjected to intense psychiatric evaluations. They asked me repeatedly about the mission, about the golden children, about the truth. I answered their questions as best I could, all the while watching the shadowy outline of the doctor on the wall behind him. "What can you tell me about Commander Handler?" he asked one day. "Why, just your experiences with him. What do you think of him? Anything that sticks out?" I thought of Handler's jerky movements, his fake smile, the way his shadow didn't seem to follow him quite right. "Nothing unusual," I lied. "Interesting." He scribbled a note on his tablet. "And the document you were sent to retrieve?" "I don't recall any document." He smiled, as if that was a relief to him. "Good," he said. "That's good." I gazed out my window at the base staff going about their business, but there was something about the way they moved that seemed off, as if they were merely pretending to be busy. A few days later, Sergeant Foster knocked on my door. He looked a little more nervous than usual. "Chen," he whispered. "Back, you look good." "Foster, what do we see out there?" He looked at the camera and then sat down on a chair next to my bed. "Technical difficulties, lack of oxygen, hallucinations." But his face said something else. "And the golden children. There are no golden children," he said, like he was quoting something. "There's no God. There's only the Global Peace Alliance." Suddenly, a nurse entered with my pills, and Foster got to his feet. "Get well soon, Lieutenant. We need more good cops out there." But no sooner had I taken the pills, I heard Dr. Wells talking to someone outside. "Assimilation is going smoothly. Subject is compliant with the mental reprogramming." "Excellent." Multiple children spoke in unison. "It is not yet time for the truth to be revealed." Tight. I lost track of time. Sometimes I woke up and saw the golden children standing at the foot end of my bed. Other times, I saw the staff doing their work. And sometimes, my restraints were loosened, and I found a note on my chest saying, "The ice is thawing. The truth will be free. Remembering is good." Snow began to fall outside, or maybe it was ash. It was hard to tell in the dark. The following weeks went by in a blur. I have no idea how long it took, but by the time they thought I was ready to go back to work, it was early spring. I was still hallucinating from time to time, but at least I was able to think more clearly. It felt good to get out of the medical wing. A few days later, I was discharged from the medical ward. It was impossible to tell exactly how many days, though, since time still felt a bit off. It wasn't raining anymore, and some of the snow, or ash, had melted away, leaving Fort Horizon looking cleaner than ever. I put on my dress uniform, which felt a bit unfamiliar to me now, and went to see Commander Handler. He had moved into an office in the new Central Command on the top floor. I took the elevator there. As the doors opened, I was greeted by a sight that was very different from the usual GPA style. "Lieutenant Chen," Handler said, words imbued with an unnatural weight, "welcome back to the force." Oh. He was standing by the window, his face obscured by the gray light, a large golden cross around his neck casting a shadow that made no sense. "Thank you, sir," I said. "Take a seat if you would. We have a lot to talk about." The chair was cold. Handler walked over to his desk and sat down behind it. His uniform had changed from the standard GPA garb to something more elaborate. "You've done very well," he said, with the same mysterious smile. "The seals were well maintained." "Seals, sir. Between knowing and not knowing," he gestured to the desk, "between knowing and unknowing. I could remember the dreams, but only parts of them, a pair of yellow eyes, the sound of children laughing. Sir, the mission. The mission was a success." He cut me off. "The truth is protected." "What truth?" I blurted out. "What is this all really about?" His grin grew a bit wider still. "We're keeping the peace, Lieutenant, the new peace. Haven't you noticed? Improvements, no more nations, no more wars, no more." He paused. Pointless questions. The cross on his chest glowed with an eerie brightness, and his shadow seemed to dance behind him with a will of its own. "With respect, sir," I said, clutching the arms of the chair as if they could anchor me to reality. "I think I deserve some answers. What happened to my team? What are the Golden Children?" "What?" "Careful, Lieutenant," he said, his voice resonating in a way that made my teeth hurt. "Some questions open doors that cannot be closed." "I saw the melt," I continued. "I saw what happened to Private Chen, to Jackson. You saw. You saw what you needed to see." Handler stood up, his movements uncanny and fluid. "Your role in this new world order is too important to be tainted by recollections." "My role." He pressed a button, and one of the walls turned into a large screen. I saw my own face on the screen. There were posters of me, news articles, propaganda. I was depicted as some kind of messiah. "The people need heroes," Handler said, "symbols of light for the new era." "But I muttered, "I never." "It's not about what's real, Lieutenant. It's about what we say is real." I stood up. "This is wrong. All of it. Whatever you are, whatever you're planning." "Lisa," he said, using my name for the first time, "you're special. You've been chosen to take on a very important role. Don't ruin it by thinking about things that will only bring you pain." The cross on his chest glowed with a bright light, and for a second, I saw the truth. "You're dismissed, Lieutenant," he said, his voice back to normal. "Some things are better left buried." The descent was quick. As soon as I got back to my quarters, I saw that the walls were covered from top to bottom with propaganda posters, the same ones I had seen in the office. My face was everywhere, smiling, looking happy, proud and strong. It made me sick. I received orders through my tablet to give a speech to the rest of the base personnel the next day. It was already written for me and talked about unity, purpose, and truth. I looked out through the window and saw how the people outside were marching in perfect harmony. Their shadows were beginning to blend together. A message popped up on my tablet. It was from F. "The ice continues to melt. Choose your truth carefully." F. I looked at my reflection in the window. Which version of me was the real one? The one on the posters or the one with the doubts? I looked up and saw the white sky. Was it real, or was it about to be painted by someone else's truth? The following 3 days were blurry. I delivered the speech as ordered. My voice echoed across the parade grounds, and thousands of empty eyes looked back at me. At night, I looked for more messages from F, but nothing ever showed up. The sky was still white, and little by little, the seed of doubt that had been planted during my meeting with Handler cracked open and began to grow. I sat in my room, looking at the posters on my wall. They were all of me, with a golden added to my skin to make me look more angelic. 3 days had gone past since I had talked to Handler, and I still didn't understand what was going on. The morning briefing appeared on my tablet. I was about to ignore it, but then I saw something that caught my attention. A tactical team had been sent to the Vatican 8 hours ago, without me. That's my squad. I mumbled to myself. I opened the mission details, but most of it was blacked out. Only the objective was clear: retrieve the asset and bring it back to the base. Top priority. I tried to contact Foster, but he didn't answer. When I tried to call Martinez and Paddle, I got the same answer for both of them. Currently on an operation. I walked through the corridors of Fort Horizon and realized how people moved out of my way, almost as if they saw me coming from a mile away. I took the elevator up to Handler's office and felt my anger boiling inside of me with every floor I ascended. When the doors opened, I entered an empty office. The golden cross still hung on the wall, but I don't know how to describe it. It felt like the shadows moved in a different way. Commander Handler can't come to the phone right now. The children's voices said in unison. 3 golden children appeared in a corner of the room. I could have sworn was empty a second ago. They were naked, and their skin glowed brightly. "Where are my friends?" I asked them. "Truth," they said together, "finds its own level, like water or ice. No more riddles. I need to get to them." The smallest girl turned her head at an awkward angle. "Did they? Are you sure?" The elevator chimed, and Handler stepped out. His movements were more robotic than usual, and the cross on his chest seemed to be flashing in rhythm with the shadows. "Lieutenant Chen," he said, his smile devoid of all humanity. "I thought we agreed that there would be no unnecessary questions. You sent my squad out without me? Why?" Your position is far too valuable to deploy on missions." He walked over to his desk with a gliding movement. "You are an icon. Icons need to be kept safe." "Safe for what?" The golden children laughed, a sound like shattering glass. 3 days later, I sat in the debriefing room, reading over the after-action report, which made no sense. Martinez was the only one who came back, and she seemed to be reading from a prepared script. "We retrieved it from the Vatican archive," she said matter-of-factly. "Italy's golden boy, the 9th key. Foster learned to lay dot." "Where is he?" I asked. "Where are the others?" "Sergeant Foster died a hero," Handler said coolly, sacrificing himself in a valiant effort to hold off the enemy while the rest of the crew completed the mission. "That's not true," I said, standing up from the table. "Foster wouldn't." "Truth is whatever we say it is," Handler said. "Maybe you need to go back to medical." "Where are my people?" I shouted. "What the hell is the 9th seal? What the Zersenstein are you?" His smile grew a bit larger. "Easy, Lieutenant," he said. "Some questions open doors that can't be closed. Some answers destroy the asker." "I saw what you did," I replied. "I saw people melting. I saw kids who weren't kids. You saw what you needed to see." He stood from his chair, rising in a way that seemed almost unnatural. "Your position and what happens next is too important to be compromised by truth." A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't say anything. "The ice melts?" she says. The boy of gold points north. The ninth seal breaks, and truth flows like water. Jet her to medical, Handler said. Two officers emerged from nowhere, their shadows off in an inexplicable way. As they dragged him away, Handler turned back to me. His cross was glowing again. Go back to your room, Lieutenant, he said. Remember your mission. Remember what happens when you ask too many questions. I watched Martinez being dragged away, hearing her last words in my mind. The boy of gold points north. Outside the windows, ash or snow was falling, glimmering with golden reflections in the twilight. The boy of gold, I thought. Tomorrow his face would be plastered all over the propaganda posters. Another hero, another lie. But in the Vatican, a boy of gold was pointing north, and Foster, the real Foster, had died figuring out what that meant. My tablet buzzed. I had received new orders, another speech, more truths to be told. But there was something else hidden in the message. The ninth keeps them all. Seek the golden boy. I wondered how many more secrets would come out before the ice had melted completely. I spent the next several hours in my office, pondering over the last encrypted message. Once the night shift started, and the corridors became less crowded, I returned to my quarters. I tried to go to sleep, but I couldn't. I was waiting for something, but I didn't know what. Then, at 0300, my tablet screen lit up. The tablet I had been given lit up in the middle of the night, and I awoke to the sight of the same propaganda images on the walls. It was me, with a synthetic smile on my face, saying that everything would be fine if we just listened to orders. I was beginning to hate her more and more with each passing day. I couldn't stop thinking about Martinez's empty eyes and Foster's last message of the ninth seal, the golden boy north water. It all had to be connected somehow. I wanted to stay and figure it out, but I couldn't. I had to leave. I had to get away from Handler and his influence. Someone knocked on my door, 3 quick knocks, a pause, and then 2 more. I recognized it. It was the first code they taught us in boot camp. Come in, I said softly. Private Torres came in, and I was happy to see his shadow was acting normal. Lieutenant, he said quickly. I tried to see if I could detect any of the Handler in his face. Prove it. One, you saved me in Mumbai. You mentioned that people who are displaced aren't just victims. Handler was impressed with your ingenuity, but you said that you didn't think it was a tactic, that you just thought it was the right thing to do. I tried to relax my shoulders. What is it? They're up to something. The golden children, they're all over the place, and I saw Martinez in medical. She's not Martinez anymore. I know. I looked out at the ash snow. I can't stay here, Torres. Not anymore. That's why I'm here. He reached into his coat and retrieved a small parcel. New ID, travel passes, some crypto. Some of us still have a heart, you know. I looked down at the documents. They were convincing. The face on the ID was my own, but slightly changed. Not wearing a uniform. Lisa Chen is too high profile, Torres explained. But Lisa Chang, she's just a tech consultant looking for a job in the Southern Hemisphere. New Zealand. He nodded. No GPA. It's mostly self-governed, although they don't tell people that. The same networks work there. We both heard the sound of footsteps approaching in the hallway and froze. The sound of boots went past us in unison. You need to leave, I said. The more you know about what's next, the more trouble you'll be in, Lieutenant, he said, unsure. Whatever's happening, whatever they're doing with the seals and the golden boy, watch yourself. Some answers are worse than questions. I gave him a hug before I left. Stay human, Torres. You too, LT, you too. I waited until the next shift began and snuck out of my room, wearing civilian clothes. I made my way out of the base, trying to avoid being spotted. Maintenance request. The guard asked, his voice still robotic. Site 7 maintenance. I repeated, mimicking the monotone voice of the assimilated staff. He nodded and gave me the keys to a GPA transport. I tried not to look too eager as I walked over to it. Every minute of that 20-minute drive felt like a lifetime. I kept waiting to get stopped by handlers' people or by golden children, but it never happened. The cargo transport was fueled up and waiting for me on the runway. The pilot was another contact of mine. Maintenance check, I said, holding up the fake credentials I'd taken from Torres. Right, the pilot said. I'm headed to Auckland, just a delivery. I made my way into the back of the transport and hid amongst the cargo, thinking I'd be able to make my escape in this way. But then, a few minutes later, I heard Handler's voice over the radio. Attention, all outbound flights. Security measures have been heightened. Please prepare for a golden child inspection. Understood, the pilot said easily. However, I am on a bit of a schedule. Medical supplies for Auckland. There was a long pause. Proceed, Handler's voice said finally, but record all incoming passenger manifests. A Roger command. Launching now. After a 9-hour flight we landed, and I was picked up by someone else. Good luck, he told me before heading back out into the night. A couple weeks later, I found myself on a remote beach on the South Island of New Zealand, watching the sunset. A small cabin built into the hillside was my new off-grid home. Still, I kept a tablet with me, receiving encrypted messages from the network. They told me that the golden children were making more and more appearances, and that more people were beginning to convert to Handler's new way of thinking. A statue of a young boy had been erected in Rome, and its golden arm was pointing north. I deleted the messages, but they stuck with me. Whatever lay beneath the ice, it wasn't over yet. I realized that I couldn't hide from this thing forever. But I tried to put it out of my mind for now. I took a deep breath of fresh air and looked out over the ocean, trying to remember what it was like to be human again. The sun had disappeared below the horizon now, and I could see my shadow stretching out behind me in the moonlight. It was just a normal shadow, I was glad to see, and there was no ash falling from the sky. The weeks turned into months, and I got used to my new home on the South Island. I lived off the land, fishing and hunting, and occasionally going into town for supplies. My cabin was hidden in the forest, and I rarely saw anyone else. I kept to myself and didn't draw attention to myself. It was a beautiful sunset over the ocean when I finished writing on my tablet. It's been around 6 months since I escaped Fort Horizon. I live in a small cabin on a cliff overlooking the Tasman Sea. I feel safe here, but for how long? As I have done with every entry, I encrypted today's file with a special program given to me by Torres. I wanted to make sure someone would find it if something happened to me. I don't think Handler will be able to decrypt it. They cast the wrong shadows. I received a notification from the network. The golden boy moves. The text read, Rome was just the beginning. Check the ice sheets. I checked out satellite photos of Antarctica. The ice was melting away much faster than anyone had ever anticipated, and I could see something shimmering underneath it, and it looked golden. Just then, I got a call on my emergency line. Chang. It was Torres. Chang, can you hear me? Yeah. I hear you. What's up, man? Martinez broke out of medical. She's all messed up, but before they grabbed her, she told me to tell you about the 9th seal. Said you'd know what it meant, that Ike. I went over to the window and looked out at the darkness. What did she say? I asked. The boy points north because south is where the truth flows. The breaking of the seal is the food for the sea. He lowered his voice. The handler went himself to Antarctica to do some kind of ceremony. A shiver ran down my spine, and it had nothing to do with the weather. Tors, whatever you do, if you see any golden children. Static erupted from the receiver. I heard children's laughter. Tors. Tors. Static. I went through my evacuation routine. The go bag was already packed, a habit from Fort Horizon. Just as I was about to grab my coat, I noticed a strange reflection in the window. It was a child standing on my deck, naked, with glowing golden eyes. Lieutenant Lisa Chen, it said in that terrible chorus of voices, "The truth misses you." "That's not my name anymore," I replied slowly, reaching for the weapon hidden beneath my desk. "Names are temporary. Truth is eternal." The child's smile stretched too wide. "The ninth seal breaks tomorrow. Handler sends his regards." "What happens when it breaks?" "Everything." The child's form began to blur at the edges. "And nothing. The ice melts. The truth flows. And humanity evolves." Into what? But it was gone. I received a notification on my tablet. There was suddenly a lot of activity around Antarctica. Ships and aircraft were moving toward a single point, and something was coming out of the ice at that point. Then I received a message from an unknown source. "Some truths unmake the world." F. Foster, I thought. He tried to warn me. Now I knew what he had seen. Now I knew why he had to die. The ninth seal wasn't a seal. It was a door. And tomorrow Handler was going to open it. I looked down at the tablet in my hand. There was one more file I had yet to upload. "Broadcast to all channels," the system asked. The storm was intensifying, and the ocean could be heard pounding on the rocks outside. The stars were out, and yet everything felt dark. And I realized Handler was right. Sometimes you have to break things to find the truth. "Send," I said aloud. I uploaded the file everywhere I could think of, all the secret networks, all the places where there were still people left. I hope they read it. I hope they understand. I hope they prepare. And then I saw the golden lights rise from the ocean. The golden children were coming soon. They would be here, and something else right behind them. I grabbed my bag and headed down to the beach. The truth is coming out now. There's nothing I can do to stop it. All I can do is write it down, remember it, and hope someone will read it and realize what they missed when they stopped asking questions. The golden lights were shining brightly now, reflecting in the water. I felt the ninth seal breaking, but I kept walking toward the beach, my shadows